Okay, so our next speaker is Sylvia Komatsu. She's a Chief Content Officer. I know, woo! Chief Content Officer at KERA here in Dallas. And KERA is one of our sponsors, sponsoring our lunch and the book by Carol Fulp, who Sylvia is going to introduce.
Well, welcome everyone. Let me get this adjusted. Our CEO, Mary Ann Al-Hadif, so wanted to be here today, and she sends each of you her best wishes and greetings. Also, we wanted you to know that all of us at KERA, including the 25 wonderful women from our station who are here today, woo! We are delighted that you've joined us here in Dallas for this very special event. We also want to express our gratitude to Deanna, the founder here of Public Media Women in Leadership, because there are so many wonderful opportunities that this organization is providing us, and a perfect example is, of course, today's incredibly thoughtful conversation. Thank you so much, Deanna. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce Carol Fulp, a nationally recognized authority on diversity and inclusion. For the last 7 years, Carol has served as president and CEO of the Partnership, Inc., New England's premier organization dedicated to enhancing the competitiveness of the region by attracting, developing, retaining, and convening multicultural professionals. During its 3 decades, the partnership has collaborated with 300 corporations who have sponsored more than 4,000 multicultural professionals in its leadership development programming. What a major accomplishment. And since Carol became president and CEO, she has significantly increased the partnership's impact and reach. She has exponentially grown the organization's financial strength and expanded programming to the C-suite level and to the life sciences sector. Carol has also created board and employment placement services. Prior to the partnership, Carol held executive roles at John Hancock Financial, WCVB, the ABC-TV Boston affiliate, and the Gillette Company. And in 2010, President Barack Obama appointed her as representative of the United States to the 65th session of the United Nations General Assembly. And there's more. Carol has served on many prestigious boards and continues to do so. She's been a long-time member of the Harvard Kennedy School Women's Leadership Board. She's a trustee of the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library Foundation. And she serves on the board of Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. And she is the co-chair of the Massachusetts Conference for Women. This is the largest professional women's conference in the country, attracting more than 17,000 attendees annually. Carol is the recipient of many honors, including the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce Distinguished Bostonian Award and the Museum of African American History's Living Legend Award. 2 years ago, Boston Magazine listed Carol as one of the 21 most powerful people in Boston business. We're thrilled to have Carol here today. She will be sharing some of the research from her new book, Success Through Diversity: Why the Most Inclusive Companies Will Win. So please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Carol Fulp.
That was such a warm introduction. Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful, wonderful morning. I snuck in a little early, and I sat in the back as Laura was presenting, and I was thinking about Maya Angelou as you were talking, Laura. And Maya Angelou has a statement, many of you know it, and it says, she says, "You may forget what someone may have said, but you never forget how they made you feel." And Laura, when I listened to you, I felt, you know, we could edit Maya's statement and say, with Laura, we'll never forget what she said. And we'll never forget how she made us feel. So Laura, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing your personal story, and thank you for the statistics and for the leadership you have provided so many, so many. I get to see a lot of leaders, but I so value your leadership. So let's give her another round of applause. You know, I thought that I would start my talk with you today. I wanted to talk about the advantages of women leading, because frequently we talk about, well, what we don't have. I always choose to look at the glass as half full and not half empty. So today I wanted to talk about what are the advantages that we bring to the table and why you should hire us, why you should retain us, and why you should promote us, and why we should be at the top of the game. Because as you've seen, you saw that brain earlier from Laura's presentation, we bring some very distinctive skills, and that's a real advantage. And it's important for us to be able to demonstrate that those skills that we bring are clearly an advantage to organizations. And so for me, that's one of the reasons why I wrote my book, Success Through Diversity: Why the Most Inclusive Companies Will Win. Because at the end of the day, it's about winning. And we want companies to hire the best talent with the best skills. And if they don't, they're not going to win. So today we're going to talk about the talent, the skills that women bring that enable companies to win. Would you like to do that? Yeah. Good. I think Laura already set the stage, so we're going to do that. So let me start by telling you my story. I'm a child of the civil rights movement. I would not be standing here today were it not for the civil rights movement. So I get a little choked up, so bear with me. Were it not for that movement, I probably would be here. I probably would be serving you. But I would not be speaking at this podium were it not for the civil rights movement. I've marched on Washington with my parents. As a result, that movement enabled me to go from segregated schools in New York, in Queens, to go to schools that were now integrated. I was able to go to white colleges as opposed to just having limited, fabulously, historically black colleges open to me, but just limited colleges. And I was able to move to neighborhoods that were never open for me. And I was able to work in areas, in businesses that were never open to people who look like me. And so for me, my responsibility is so small compared to the others who sacrificed and even died so that I could be standing before you today. So I take this role so personally and so seriously. And my job is to open the door for others of difference to walk through. Now, one of the things I've always done is this. First, I always tell people I love being a woman. I embrace being a woman. I don't shy away from it. I love being black. And even so, I love being West Indian, if you ask me. I'm from the Virgin Islands. There's very few people from there, but I love being Caribbean. So love who you are. It gives you strength, it gives you history, it gives you a sense of pride, and it gives you courage. It gives you the bravery that we talked about earlier. So I love being a woman, but I'm also very strategic. I've had to be strategic because after all, as a person of difference, all of us have had to learn at an early age how to overcome obstacles that have been thrown in our paths through no fault of ourselves. We've had to learn how to navigate those waters and those boulders that have been thrown in our paths. And so for me, I have always focused on women's organizations and on advancing women. Why do you think that is? Best candidates. Here I am, a black woman, and it's been my experience that if they're not letting women in, they're not letting blacks in. So women, for me, are the first wave. And so I'm always with the first wave. I'm always focused on advancing women, because if women are able to get in, people of color are right behind. And so I work on issues of advancing women and advancing people of color. And so that's been my life's work. I'll tell you a little bit about my career. I started with the Gillette company. I always wanted to engage in community services. I was in human resources there, and it took me a year to find the right job. And I think one of the things that is so helpful is that journey to find the right job. I found a great job in community services, but they were going to pay me $10,000 less than what I was making. And I hadn't realized that I liked money more. But that was wonderful as you go through this journey to understand that. And so I didn't take that job. I found a job in community services, but it was north of Boston, more in the suburbs. And I wanted to work in urban Boston. And I found it's the right job. It's moving me from human resources to community relations, but it's not serving the community I wanted to embrace. And so I found that that was not the right job for me. And then I happened to be sitting next to the president of, and this is in the book, I happened to be sitting next to the president of the ABC TV affiliate at a dinner in Boston. And I talk about this in the book, about the importance of networking and getting out and going to events, because you'll never know who you meet. Ann Fudge, an amazing African-American woman, was sitting next to Jack Welch, who at that time was the chairman of General Electric. He was striking up a conversation with her. As her husband drove Ann home that night, he said, "Ann, you realize he was interviewing you for his board?" And she said, "No, not really." You never know when you meet someone socially what will happen professionally. Networking is so important. So get out there and network, become involved, and engage with as many individuals as you can who can help you along your career. So I happened to sit next to the president of the ABC TV affiliate. Remember earlier I told you, embrace yourself, don't run away. I actually said to him, because I was fundraising for local nonprofits, and I said to him, I said, how come we never see you at any of the Black events? And he said, and I had been able to say this because we had struck up a nice conversation. I wasn't threatening. And he said to me, he said, that's because you always give them on the weekends. And if you want CEOs at your events, give them during the week, because we view them as work events. Weekends are for our families. And so I learned something from him. My event still happened to be on the weekend and was already scheduled, but he sent his PR person to the event. And I was really impressed by that. 3 months later, a position as HR director came available in his station, and I was asked to come and interview for it. I wasn't looking for an HR job, but this station was the most awarded station for their community work in the country. So what did I understand? What was I learning along this year-long journey? For me, and this was the important lesson, culture is more important than anything. And so the culture of this company was important. When you go for an interview, always arrive early. I don't need to tell you that. Sit and watch and look at the culture of that company. Who walks past you? At that company, different people walked past. Women, people of color, and even a man in pink furry slippers. And for me, that meant diversity. And I knew I could succeed there. I had earlier, 2 months before, interviewed at a bank where the receptionist asked me, would I like to freshen up in the powder room? That was a little straight for me. And where I was being interviewed by 3 gentlemen who were all tall, who all had blonde hair and blue eyes, and all had blue pinstripe suits. That was their picture of success, not me. And even more, they were interviewing me for a position where they wanted to fire someone. Hadn't fired someone yet, but wanted to find someone before they fired someone. So culturally, that was not the best place for me. But that was an incredible learning experience. And so while the job at Channel 5, at WCVB TV, was not the exact job that I wanted, the culture was. I knew the technical skills. The leadership believed in me, and it was known as the community station. And then finally, I got the job, and when the community programming vice president left, she also was African American, she left to form her own company. I went and pitched to combine the 2 jobs, and I got it. I didn't get 2 salaries. But I finally got to do community. And so I just want to say, embrace yourself, go for it, and understand that culture is the most important thing. I stayed there 11 years, and I knew that in order to grow, I had to leave. And sometimes you need to know that. And I knew I wasn't going to be president. I didn't want to be president. I knew I had to go back to corporate. And so I went to John Hancock to head up community relations there. And when I left, the president of the station said to me, "But Carol, you're not going to be able to wear your black pantsuits there, your black leather pantsuits there." And I said, "I know, but you don't know how much they're paying me." Trade-offs. But I left there. I went to John Hancock, changed the title, corporate responsibility. It's not about community relations. I wanted all of those departments to know they were a part of this. It was corporate responsibility, and every program that we created was a part of the sponsorship. If we had a sports sponsorship, there was a community program that we created so that community kids were a part of our Major League Baseball sponsorship, were a part of our ice capades sponsorship, were a part of our Boston Marathon sponsorship. And then ultimately, I too wanted to grow beyond that role, and pitched during the financial crisis, when all the other financial companies were shrinking and hiding. I said, well, you know, given all that we've done for our community. This is an opportunity for us to be able to say, when you put your John Hancock on something, it means something. And so rather than shrink, why don't we leverage all the good work that we've done in the community to differentiate ourselves from other financial companies? And they like that. They bought it. And sometimes you'll find that when things are really down in the dumps, and when things are really low and there's no money, no budget, when things are really bad, that's when they give it to you. So know that and understand that. So strategically, when things are bad, that might be an opportunity for you to take something, build it, and create. And so I was able to have marketing under me. And John Hancock was known, the New York Times had named John Hancock as one of the 100 most recognizable brands in the world. So I had the opportunity to have branding under my purview. But it really was the presidential race that changed my life. I didn't know how far we would go, but I was going to go as far as this campaign took me. I was one of the 5 members of 5 creators of Obama for New England. We were picking him up when he was flying coach. We were picking him up when he had 10% name recognition, when he won Iowa, when he then came to New Hampshire, and we were all up there saying, oh, well, okay, so has Dartmouth come in yet? And we were shocked that he didn't win New Hampshire. And then he came down to Boston hoarse and said, you know, I'm glad that we lost New Hampshire because this is a cause, and causes don't happen overnight. And it's like Icarus. I think we flew too close to the sun. And so we need to understand that we need to be as humble as possible, and we need to really focus on what the people want. And we did. And eventually we won, and you know where it took us. I raised $2 million for the campaign. I had a bracelet that said Obama, Biden, and I would say this is the most expensive bracelet I own. My friends would go across the street when they saw me coming. But that was the happiest moment of my life. I'm a little girl who marched on Washington with her parents to now being at the White House, at state dinners, at Christmas parties, at seeing an African American in the White House, and hearing that when they moved him in, it's the little stories, they moved him in, the butlers took his suits and they just took their hand and they went down and they kissed his suits. Because you can imagine what they must have witnessed in that house. So, here we are, at a different time. History repeats itself. We've been here before, and we're gonna move on, and we're gonna be on top. And that's why it's important that women lead. and lead well. And you know where I learned that? I learned that at the United Nations. The president appointed me to the United Nations, and at the United Nations, women's issues were talked about every day. Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, and strategically, women's issues were so important. What you found was that when a woman was economically successful and secure, her family was better off, her community was better off, her country was better off. So strategically, it made good sense to empower women across the world. And then you also found that the 17 women heads of state, there were no wars in their country. And here you have this amazing UN body whose mission is to have peace throughout the world. And with these women presidents, there were no wars in their country. And that was a reason why, because of the way they led and what they cared about. And so it made sense to invest in women. And so, again, I was empowered by my gender. When I came back, I went to my CEO, who I had such a great relationship with. And again, culture is so important. It's so important to be in a place where you can be yourself. I went to my CEO, I went down the hall, and I said to him, look, we got the white, male, affluent, over 50 market sewed up. We got that at John Hancock. We got that. But if we're going to grow, we need to expand our market into the women's market, into markets of color. And he said, And I said, we have a woman who is chair of our parent company. We need to leverage that. And so why not let me put together an initiative called Women Count with all different women from around the company and create a program around that. And he said, fine, go ahead. And so we did. But again, it was profitable. When you say profit, people listen to you. I then moved on to the partnership where I'm currently leading, because I wanted Boston to look more like the United Nations. When I stood at that iconic podium and looked out the sea of faces of ambassadors of the 177 member states, most of the world is black and brown and yellow. And I wanted Boston to be more reflective of our global state. And so I took on the partnership role. And now, as I've written this book, and it's been such a great success, I am going to be moving on from the partnership. I was telling Laura that I'm going to be going, like her, I'm going to the Harvard Advanced Leadership Initiative, where you can create your own program. What I've learned from my work at the partnership is that we can develop individuals of difference to their fullest. We can do that. We can lead and guide you and help you reach your fullest potential. But if you're going back to companies that are not ready for you, we all lose. And so my work now is going to focus on helping companies shift their cultures so that they can be more inclusive. So that is my work. So let's now focus on you. You've heard my story. Let's talk about you and the advantages that you bring. Let's talk about how women lead. Do you lead differently? What do you think? Okay, how? All right? How do you lead differently? Empathy. You do. Holistically. I like that. Compassionately. Sorry? Win-win. I like that. You help with the work, right, right, not just say do this. Right, I like that. Listening, that's a good one. Strategic. Wow. Wow, we don't always see that in the workplace, do we? That's great. Anything else? Giving credit as opposed to taking credit. These are some of the characteristics that we bring to the table, all good characteristics. And one of the things that's important to know is that a leader has to have people following them. You just can't say, you follow me, right? It doesn't work that way. You have to have people who want to follow you. And so you have to be able to draw people in. So what I want to ask you, are there disadvantages to the way we lead? Burnout. Oh, burnout. Sexism, that's real. Take advantage of you. Yep, my husband tells me that all the time. He said, people just want to take everything out of my pockets. Say that again? Wait for too much approval. Wait for permission. Get asked to do more.
Still having more home responsibilities.
I'm sorry?
Balancing that with still having additional home responsibilities more than
Juggling much on the job and at home. Emotionally invested. That's for sure. Taking people's opinions and giving them more weight than they deserve. You're so empathetic. So it takes longer. Disadvantage is that you're not included, not readily included by the power base. All? Say that again, please. Wow, judging other women too harshly. And competing with other women. Jealousy. And that's an important thing to talk about because what's happening, we're eating our young when we do that. It's crabs in the barrel. And when we do that, the power base is fine because we're arguing amongst ourselves and, you know, not growing, and they're fine because they're still amassing power and we're bringing each other down. They don't even need to bring us down. We're bringing ourselves down. So we don't need to do, they don't need to do anything. We're doing it to ourselves. A lot of that is culture, too, our culture do that. So how are women leaders perceived overall? How are we perceived by men? We're a threat by men. Wow. Irrelevant and a lot of, what did you say about the voices? I said the louder voices. And the louder voices. Can I share with you a story that happened, talking about louder voices? I'm going to share a story that Valerie Jarrett shared just last week. She has a book out. She shared a story, and it's in her book, so I'm not telling tales out of school, that as wonderful a culture as President Obama had at the White House, that the women came to her and said that they felt their voices were not being heard, that the men, many of whom had been on the campaign trail, and many women, they chose to get who were specialists. They just pulled from all of these fabulous fields because they wanted to head up different areas. Many of the men were louder in terms of their voices, and women didn't feel that they could even raise their voice. And men started saying, well, I know the president, I know what he'll want, and the women didn't feel they could speak up. And so what Valerie did was she told the president this, and he said, well, do you think we have a problem? She said, yes. And he said, I want you to gather the women for a dinner, and I want to hear it from them themselves. They went to dinner. He heard from them. He said, I want you to speak up. You are important to me. And if you don't speak up, I am not able to do my job because I need to hear your voice. They began speaking up, and even more so, he began calling on them. And what also happened, which is good for everybody to know here, as Valerie had that first session, organically, that group of women began to continually meet and support each other. So that was an opportunity for them to support each other. And they continued to meet throughout the administration and gained further strength. So it doesn't matter. So what happens is you look at those two brains and understand that, you know, men are wired differently. And they may push out. Your voice may not get heard in a culture that wants to be equitable. So unless you indicate this behavior is occurring, people may not know that they're operating in a biased way. So we do have to call out bias. So I appreciate you saying that. Are women leaders perceived differently by women? How so? They're judged harshly. Increased expectations.
I think there's a generational difference. So women who are a generation or two ahead of me they need to fight harder than I have to fight. And so I think sometimes there's a dismissal of your desire for more advancement. I think it should be 20 years to get here, so slow
Ooh, wow. I'm glad you said that.
Well, I think Laura said something interesting, which has happened to me all my career, which is you will say something, you will have the courage to say something, come up with an idea, you won't be heard, and then some man will say, pretty much what you just said, and everybody will think it's a great idea. So do you speak up and say, didn't I just say that?
Yeah, that happens to me. That happens to me. It still happens. So here's the way I choose to handle it. It happens to me at a board meeting. So when I say something, they'll nod, and then so-and-so says it, they'll say, oh, wasn't that a great idea? And I'll say, oh, I'm so glad you agree with the idea that I had mentioned a few minutes ago. I want to give them credit, because you got to give them credit, but you want to make sure. The other thing that I've noticed is when there's more than one woman in the room, you can have your colleague will say it for you so that you don't have to say it yourself, so that I can say, oh, Marie said that a few minutes ago. That's fabulous that you guys think that's a good idea. So that's support group and support system, and then we have to do that for one another. You have to, because it's only going to continue. And it doesn't matter what level you are, it is going to continue. So we have to think of ways to diplomatically manage it, because it's going to continue to occur. And so, again, those are the skills that we bring. We can navigate those obstacles that are put in our path. Because why? Because we know they're going to be put in our path. And that's true. Women. Any other? Yeah. Let me tell you a statement one of my colleagues, who is a Latino male, said to me, and I just am amazed by the comment. He said, "Do you know who has the greatest affirmative action in America? White males." He said, because what they do is they're in an organization, and they look and they see John, who looks like them when they were young, and they reach down in the organization and pluck John up and help John in his career and help him up. He said, that's affirmative action. So I think we need to understand it in that term, that that's how it happens. And so if that's how it is happening, if that's the system, who are we doing that for? If that's the system, who are we doing that for? And that is our job, to open the doors for others and let them in. When I announced that I was leaving the partnership and there was a piece in the paper, I made sure to tell the reporter that one of the reasons why I'm leaving is that I felt that too many of us stay too long, and we do not let the next generation lead, and that it is so important to pass the baton, because we need to do that. And then our jobs are to help the next generation succeed. But too many people hold on to that power too long. But there's so many opportunities out there. We could do so many things, but we need to help that next generation lead. So yes, that's the system, and who are we doing it for? Another thing that I think is really critical, and I want you all to leave here. If you leave here with one thing, with one action item, here's what I want you to do. One thing that is really critical is for you to have your own personal board of directors. How many of you have your own personal board of directors now? Oh, great. That's fabulous. You should have your own personal board of directors. You should also understand that as you grow, they may change. My personal board of directors is the CEO who held this slot before me. She's a longtime friend. The president of Cambridge College, the former First Lady of Massachusetts, and the former, I have a male, and the former president of Verizon. All people who I've known for a long time, all people I can trust, I can be myself with, I can cry, I can be scared with. We all need to have people we can be scared with and just be a little crazy with. But along the way, I've had different people on my personal board of directors. And as I grew, my personal board of directors changed. But right now, you want to create a personal board of directors because you cannot talk to everyone. I think that question was asked here. You cannot talk to everyone. You cannot talk to everyone at work. And you don't want to. You can't cry at work. You can't cuss everybody else out at work either, and you want to. So one action item is to have your own personal board of directors. And for me, we have scheduled dinners. I put them on the schedule so that we can have a meeting where we talk, and then always on the phone when a crisis arises. And you know those crises arise frequently. So I want you to have that too. So let me talk a little bit more about the book. So the book is called Success Through Diversity: Why the Most Inclusive Companies Will Win. And I'm fortunate to have my good friend, Rosabeth Moss Cantor, write the cover quote. She writes that the book is an eloquent and persuasive argument for tapping the power of difference to stimulate creativity and innovation. Well, who is Rosabeth Moss Cantor? She's a hoot, first of all. Professor Cantor is a professor at the Harvard Business School. The London Times has named her one of the 50 most powerful women in the world. She has 24 honorary doctoral degrees. She's the author of 19 books. She's writing her 20th right now. And she has the New York Times bestseller, Confidence. And she is someone who always believes in women. So much so that she wrote this article, this Harvard Business School article, saying, what if Lehman Brothers had been Lehman sisters? Would we be in the same place? Think about it. If you had women running Lehman's, would we be in the same place? Would it have failed? And what she says in the article is that women do lead differently. And you've noted some of the characteristics. Rosabeth indicates that women are trustworthy. We're risk takers, but we're calculated risk takers. At Lehman's, they were just taking risks all the time, carefree. We're altruistic. You said that yourself. And when we negotiate more effectively for others than for ourselves. Now, that's something you know we need to work on. That's about confidence, and we need to have more confidence in ourselves. We need to have more confidence to help close that wage gap and to understand that we have value. And it's difficult because culturally, we are not groomed to think about ourselves. Culturally, we are groomed to think about others. So if you can only do it this way, think about, what can I do if I am able to have more money for my family? Don't think about it yourselves. Think about it for your family. How am I able to help my family? If that's going to help you push forward, do it that way first. Because you deserve it and your family deserves it, and they're depending on you. But we need to be able to negotiate for ourselves. We know how to do it. We do it so well for others. We need to do it for ourselves. Men, she says in this article, have high testosterone levels, and they're associated with more aggressive decisions. This is backed up by research from the University of British Columbia, British Business School. And when I think about this, and I think about men versus women, and the thought that men, as I said before, in terms of affirmative action, are pulling people up, and that men may be just taking more risks. At the end of the day, we want to hire the best talent of all kinds. That's diversity. When I was having lunch with the ambassador to Nigeria, I loved how he phrased it. He said to me, and I'll use his phrasing, he said it this way. He said, "You have to think of it this way. Can you afford to win the race if you are only running on one leg?" So if you're only hiring talent of one kind, if you're only hiring men, if you're only promoting men, are you really hiring the best talent of all kinds? Are you doing the best for your company? And so I try to think of it that way, and I urge you to think of that for yourselves and for your stations as well. So let's focus a little bit more on leadership. Well, what is leadership? Leadership is the skills to motivate a group of individuals to act towards achieving a common goal or a common vision. I like to think of it that leadership is IQ plus TQ plus EQ. Remember I said that leadership, you really are compelling people to come along with you. Well, to do that, you need IQ, you need TQ, but most importantly, you need EQ. You need emotional intelligence. We like to think of it that you can't get in the door of your station without IQ. And you bring technical skills with you as well, and you're learning technical skills as well. But the further up the ladder you go, the more critical EQ skills become. And leadership requires you have strong EQ skills. The most critical leaders require strong EQ skills. And Laura is an exceptional example of that. I think you agree. And so emotional intelligence, to me, it's the most critical skill. Because I can hire someone with technical skill, but I can't hire someone with strong emotional intelligence skill. And so that's a factor that we have, and that's so important. Let's dig a little deeper. So what is emotional intelligence? Forbes indicates the following statistics hold true for individuals in all industries, at all levels, in every region in the world, that 90% of top performers have high IQ. That stands to reason. And EQ is responsible for 60% of your job performance. And at the end of the day, individuals with high EQ earn more income. They're the leaders. So that's how important EQ skills are. Well, what about women and EQ skills? Well, that's who we are. That's the advantage of women leaders. We're self-aware. Sometimes those of the other gender are not self-aware. I'm trying to be diplomatic. But we're self-aware. We're constantly thinking about ourselves and how others react to us. And so we modify behavior. We're perceptive. We multitask. Someone mentioned that we're managing work and home and all of these other tasks that we have at hand. We're great at time management. We're adaptive to change. I like to say we can turn on a dime easily, without problems. Just let me know what we need to do, or we see a problem and here's how we're going to shift. And that's something that's really important in business today. And we've got social skills. I am just going to tell you a story. There's a great researcher, diversity researcher, called Dr. Livingston, Dr. Robert Livingston. He's writing his book. He's at the Kennedy School of Government. And he does research on power. His research indicates that when you look at white male CEOs, you will find that 60% of them are over 6 feet tall. Yet, 15% of the white male population is only 6 feet tall. So people have the perception that power is tall. The other thing his research indicates is that most CEOs have angular faces, because angular faces indicate strength. And so most CEOs are 6 feet tall and have angular faces and are white males. That differs if you are a Black male CEO. If you're a Black male, you have what he entitles his book, you have baby face syndrome. Why is that? Less threatening. So the executives who are Black or who are of difference, they don't want to come across as angular. They have baby face. And one CEO he talked to said he purposefully wears these round glasses so that he appears as nerdy to fit in. And so Robert's research indicates that white males have the most power. Black males with baby faces have the next most power. White women with angular or baby face? Angular faces then have the next in power, and Black women with baby faces have the least power, are perceived as having the least power. So Robert spoke and gave this incredible research. I had to speak after Robert. And so I got up and I said, well, as a Black woman with a baby face, it's amazing I could get out of the bed this morning. But I did that, and I told the audience that I did that for a reason. I did that because people of difference have to always break down any barriers that might be between us. And so we'll use social skills or humor to bring people in or to break down whatever barriers there might be. And so you'll find that that's really important. It helps whatever people, some people may feel that I'm the other. And so that may be an immediate reaction. So because we know that, because we're different, whether you're a white woman, whatever other you are, we have to break down that barrier. I choose to use humor to break it down and bring people in. In some cases, it may be the more important skill is to use intelligence. Well, let me give you the data, depending upon the audience, but whatever, we have to quickly break down these barriers in order to be accepted, because images of us continue to prevail, and unless we break through them, they will bias the interactions that we have with individuals. And so it's best that we navigate those obstacles and try to break them down as quickly as we can. That's not our problem. It's their problem, but we know how to navigate them. And so I wanted to share that about social skills. That's certainly for sure. So I also want to share with you someone who I admire a lot, and that's Andrea Young. She's the president and CEO of Grameen America. She's the former chairman and CEO of Avon Products, board member of GE, Apple, Daimler, Venly. She is on the board of Princeton University, as well as New York Presbyterian Hospital. Fortune has named her one of the most powerful women. Forbes, she's on their most powerful women in the world list, and on the Financial Times top women in the world business list. Here's her view of EQ skills, and I'd listen to her because I think she knows what she's doing. Emotional intelligence is in our DNA because relationships are critical at every stage of our business. Of all a leader's competencies, emotional and otherwise self-awareness is the most important. Without it, you can't identify the impact you have on others. So Andrea is someone I really admire, and I wanted to share an interview with you that she had at Columbia University with some young students.
I mean, I think this is a very, very important inflection point from a diversity point of view for leadership, you know, global leadership, and for the next generation. I look at the next 10 years, and I really do believe that, you know, this generation is going to face a hugely different set of opportunities than, you know, if I go back to mine. Having said all that, you know, I mean, I think the ceiling is hardly broken for, you know, minorities, whether it be it race, be it gender. I think there's still a lot of distance to go, but I am an optimist. I think the glass is definitely half full. I mean, I was fortunate that, I mean, I had very proud parents, and I was the only Chinese, you know, in the classes that I went to when I was in grade school. And I remember going home and saying to my neighbors who were Italian, and I'd say, oh my gosh, we went to their house on Friday night and they have pasta that's so delicious. And my parents used to say to me, Marco Polo brought pasta back from China, the Chinese. And I remember going to a pulp plant, a paper factory, and saying, do you know how they make paper? And my father would say, paper was invented in China. And so I grew up in this mentality that anything innovative and anything incredible and heroic came from the grand history of China, even though I was the only Chinese family. And it felt, you know, on the other hand, you know, it really helped offset any kind of discrimination or feelings that I had growing up as the only Chinese girl in class all the way through, I think, about grade 9. So I was lucky that they instilled that sense of pride. And as I said before, with that, though, came culturally really trying to assimilate. And, you know, I grew up, you know, here, but at the same time, I had a family set of behaviors, and there were no Chinese role models. I mean, I wanted to be Connie Chung, because, I mean, there were no CEOs. If you said, do you want to be a CEO? I mean, there were no, you know, Asian women in business to emulate. So people said, well, is that what you always knew you wanted to be? I mean, how would I know I wanted to be that? I actually did. I wanted to be a journalist, and I thought that Connie Chung had a great job. So here you are interviewing me. See, you're Connie Chung. So I think it is about, there are more and more role models now, right? I mean, they're still a ceiling to be broken. I think when I became a CEO, there were no Asians that were CEOs in the Fortune 500, men or women. There were only 3 women. That rounded down to 0%. That was in 1999. So now we're looking at 20 years later, the numbers are different. There's 32 women. There are more diverse CEOs in the Fortune 500. But that, you can argue, how much progress is that in 20 years? It's taken some time. What I believe is the next 10 years will look very dramatically different, and that is because the level of talent underneath the CEO job is filled with candidates and very, very deserving candidates. As a woman, when I grew up in this business, you could be in PR, HR, human resources, maybe marketing. You didn't have the largest legal job, you did not have the largest P&L, CFO job, and those are the jobs that garner the experience to run a company. So by definition, you were, a specialty function. That's really different today when you look at Ruth Porat and, at Google as CFO. I mean, you have some extraordinary talent in the ranks one below the CEO, and therefore I think that the next 5 years is going to look hugely different. But there is strength, I think, again, in numbers as it relates to diversity. I was over in India recently, and they've instituted a new requirement that there should be one woman on a board. And I think it's progress. It's better than none. But having been the only woman around a table, whether it's a management table or a board table, for a lot of my experience over the decades, I would say that it takes more than one woman on a board or on a management team to begin to shift to a very healthy dialogue. And as I said, 100% women I would advocate, equally not. But I think to represent, I'll just use an example. So on the Daimler board, Mercedes-Benz, this is an interesting situation where the requirements in Europe now are that there are 30% women on the boards. And that is really kind of moved a very glacial pace. Without that legislation, I think it would take a lot longer. But when you think about passenger car purchases, many countries, most of the decisions for who buys the passenger car are the women in the family. Is it an SUV? Is it blue? Is it white? They're making the decisions. So in a very male industry, you have to look all the way out at the end consumer. Who's making the decisions? And your board and your management have to reflect that. So I think they've made a tremendous amount of progress. There are 30% women in management and on the board, and very, very qualified engineers. Mary Barras, the CEO of General Motors, who would have thought a woman would be running a car company in the United States. So progress is happening.
I'm sure we have questions, so we'll open it up. But before we do,
Sure.
Is there anything else that you would like to, last piece of advice that you'd like to leave us with?
I think this is an extraordinarily prescient time for I'll just call it minority, whether again, race, gender. I think that we finally reached the appropriate inflection point. The world's population and the opportunity the case has been made. If I just use women for 1 second, I think that, I don't want to get on a soapbox about equal pay, but I would just say that when I look at the pay equality for women, women of color, men of color, versus there's the gap. If it were simply, closed, equals trillions, and I think it's $28 trillion according to a McKinsey report of global GDP. So just mathematically closing the gap, the gender gap and the diversity gap in terms of equal pay creates trillions and trillions of dollars of global GDP, and in the US that's $4 or $5 trillion. So to me, this is not something that we need to wait for legislation, for law, for policy. I think the generation of leaders, academics, students going in, people say to me, so what are we going to do about that? And I said, let's say I'm a CEO, and if I'm not asking, can I please see if we are paying everybody the same, regardless of gender and race, for the same job? It doesn't take a law. I can make that decision. It would actually take, call it on a long extended thing, 1 week to get me the data, and 1 day to make the decision. Then people will say, okay, so then what if it cost you so many earnings per share? And I would argue that if I had to explain to a young Wall Street analyst that the reason I spent 2 cents a share more was that I did a one-time adjustment to pay everybody fairly so that I wasn't paying 78 cents on a dollar for the same job, I dare them to say that is an ineffective, bad use of 2 cents a share. So in my mind, I'm just using that as an example. If every single person just woke up and asked the question, you know, I'm on boards, I'm on compensation committees, we are asking the question, can we please see the data to make sure that there's not inequality of pay in 2018? Same job, same experience, it's unacceptable. And to me, you know, if we don't do it now, I mean, and if we are depending or waiting for laws, it's not gonna happen. So.
Isn't she fabulous? Isn't she fabulous? Andrea Young. So why diversity? Well, first there's the demographic shift, and I don't need to tell you that. Today there are more babies of color born in this country than Caucasian babies. By 2042, the US Census Bureau indicates there will be more people of color than Caucasians. And at the end of the day, we have 50% male and 50% women. Are our organizations reflective of that at every level? So we ask those very basic questions. And then in terms of diversity, particularly in this industry, we're looking for diversity of thought. And diversity of thought, as you know, brings about creativity. And that's critical. Diversity drives innovation. There's a new study out that indicates the more diverse organizations produce more patents. And so there is a direct linkage to diversity and innovation. And diversity brings about profitability. Andrea mentioned McKinsey. This is their 3rd year now of studying diversity. And they have indicated that the more diverse companies, particularly at the higher level, they're talking board level and CEO level, C-suite level, the more diverse companies are the more profitable companies. There is one study that's out that says if you do not diversify your company, within 10 years, you could be out of business because you're not reflective of today's marketplace. In today's marketplace, there are more millennials in the marketplace, in the workplace, than there are baby boomers. And 40% of millennials are of color. So we have this incredible mosaic. And what we need to do, what we want to do, is to create cultures where everyone can thrive. And that's why I'm so interested in this work. There's this new age of business that is dawning, and you and your industry is already rooted in this. There's this rise of the ethical corporation. When Charlottesville happened, you saw so many organizations speak out about this. Prior to that, corporations were pretty quiet about anything that happened in society. I had a conversation with Ken Frazier, the chairman of Merck, and he was the first one to step down from the president's council, manufacturing and economic council, when Charlottesville happened. And I asked him about that, and he said, you know, honestly, my son, it was my son who did it. My son at the dinner said, Dad, and as you know, Ken's African American, Dad, what are you going to do about this? So he said it was the next generation who asked me, what are you going to do about this? So I stepped down from that council. And so many other CEOs stepped down, so much so that the president disbanded the council. Lynn Dottie, the CEO of KPMG, wrote a memo to her team, to her staff throughout the US, saying, this is not who we are. This action is not who we are. I'm from Virginia. It's not who I am, and it's not who our company is. And this is not the kind of action that we at KPMG want to have in our country. I know of a company that today still tells me they did nothing. They didn't write a memo, a big corporate organization, and employees today are still saying to them, why didn't you do anything? And so today you find there are companies that really are responding to circumstances outside their walls and are responding and letting their employees know this is not the culture we choose to create here in our company. So indeed, it is all about leadership, and it is all about principle. And principle brings about profit, as we like to say, as we've seen when companies are more diverse, they're more profitable. And so I just wanted to end on a passage in the book, one of my favorite passages. It's about Mattel and their understanding of the need for diversity. So please indulge me. Toy giant Mattel is another example of a company that catapulted its business forward by appealing to a diverse marketplace. Initially, for decades since its debut in 1959, the Barbie doll, flawlessly thin, high-heeled, and white-skinned, was a cultural sensation and one of the world's best-selling toys. Over the years, Mattel modestly diversified the toys' occupations and ethnicities, creating a Barbie businesswoman, 1963, a Barbie astronaut, 65, an African-American Barbie, 67, a Barbie surgeon, 73. Mattel's efforts enabled the doll to maintain about a 90% market share in girl-oriented toys for most of the 20th century. By the mid-2000s, Barbie's dominance and brand appeal began to lag. After 4 straight quarters of plummeting sales, it was no longer the best-selling doll. The brand was losing relevance, said Lisa McKnight, Senior Vice President at Mattel. We knew we had to change the conversation. A creative team within Mattel, working for 2 years under the secretive code name Project Dawn, began Barbie's modern makeover, designing a more inclusive set of dolls that more accurately reflected the size and complexion of America's children. In 2015, Mattel unleashed the fruits of Project Dawn, launching a new generation of dolls, complete with curvy body sizes, 23 hair colors, 22 hairdos, 18 eye colors, and an array of different skin tones. This product launch, Mattel's most significant rebranding effort to date, has proven revitalizing and lucrative. Parents and children alike flock to the ethnically, racially, and bodily diverse product lines. Barbie became the most diverse doll product line, and at the Toy Industry Association's annual Toy of the Year Awards in 2017, the company won the coveted Doll of the Year award. This new generation of Barbies wouldn't have been possible without a diverse workforce inside Mattel. To help design a culturally sensitive and compelling Black Barbie, for example, the company's marketing teams consulted the Mattel African American Forum, the toy maker's African American Employee Resource Group. Members help get the doll's name, skin tone, nose, and hair just right. This was important because consumers roundly criticized the 1967 African American Barbie, colored Francie, for her inauthenticity. Besides having a darker skin tone, she lacked any bodily features or hairstyles typical of African Americans. As African American Tom Burrell, a diversity advertising trailblazer, famously quipped, Black people are not dark-skinned white people. A lack of authenticity plagued previous Barbie diversity efforts as well. With the wheelchair-bound Share a Smile Becky doll, 1997, lacking correct proportions to fit into her own dream house elevator, and the computer engineer Barbie product line requiring help from boys to actually code. However, for its new line of gamer Barbies, Mattel drew on female engineering leaders, Molly Profit, CEO of Kerchunk Games, Julianne Crummett, entertainment industry editor-in-chief at Google, and Kimberly Bryant of Black Girls Code to help it design a compelling doll that resembled a real tech geek. These women advised Mattel during the design process, ensuring that the new careers game developer Barbie was authentic, compelling, and would help inspire a new generation of budding female computer scientists and STEM leaders. The computer has JavaScript on it, and you can see various instances of game engines on her laptop, said one leader, commenting on the new line. I really know the girls need an icon that shows they can be a part of the tech space, and Barbie does that. She has the power to tell girls they can be makers and builders. Even Barbie's companion, Ken, received a total diversity makeover. Prior to the new iteration of Ken dolls, Barbie's plastic bow typically sported blonde hair, blue eyes, and a chiseled figure. Revamped Ken comes in one case with a man bun, while another sports a dad bod. A Fortune article observed. All of this increased diversity has led to more prosperity for the company. Mattel's brunette Latina Barbie with curves and brown eyes became the company's bestseller, a feat that Huffington Post senior reporter Emily Peck calls a clear victory for the toy-making giant. Following 4 years of declines, sales of the dolls increased 7% in 2006, earning nearly $1 billion for the company, certainly proving that diversity sells. So I wanted to share that passage with you as even Barbie evolves. So thank you all, and I would love to take your questions. Thank you.